So,
All right. Welcome everyone to the Killers of the Past podcast. I'm your main host, Kingsley. I have my co-host here, Marvin, with me. In this show, podcast will go over different dictators of the past and what we can learn from them. Today we are on Adolf Hitler, uh, which you probably know what he was, but we're gonna dive deeper today. Can you tell us more about who Adolf Hitler is, Marvin?
yes, what we're going to do is a perspective. We're going to give you my perspective, being that this is how we were taught back in the 60s about who he was and the beginning of how he came up. We're going to do a couple of parts of this because this is a big topic, very big topic, and we're going to give you a historical, truthful background of how he started, how he was like as a kid, how he his relationship with his mother and father. We're going to talk about his rise to power, most likely in this part. All right, so basically, we know he was born in April.
Austria.
Yeah, he was born. Yeah, he was born in Austria. Brunel is where he was born. April the 20th, 1889.
Yeah.
But before we even get to that, we also know that he is the most hated in the 20th century,
Yeah.
without doubt. So yeah, we know we've talked about Stalin, we talked about Pol Pot. There's other, oh yeah, Mussolini, but he's clearly the most hated person of the 20th century because he started a war that killed over 70 million people and injured over 250.
Germany.
Right, right. So
Yeah.
let's start with his relationship with his mother and father. He was the fourth of six children. Okay, um, most his brother died at an early age.
Yep.
So his mother, he was very close with his mother. She she doted on him. He clearly loved his mother. The father, on the other hand, he had a very contentious um, relationship with his father. Father
Yeah.
didn't like him much. Father was father was abusive to the mother and to him. Father was alcoholic. Beat
Yep.
him every chance he could get. But
Yeah.
that was in the beginning. As Hitler, his father was a civil servant, and the father wanted Adolf to follow in his footsteps. So
Yep.
he brought him to the job at one time, and unfortunately for Adolf and his father's name was Alois. He they didn't it didn't go well with that visit. That's the best way to say it. Didn't go well with that visit to the job because he didn't want to do that. All right, what did Hitler want to do? Well, he wanted to be well, when he was coming up as a kid, he had wanted to be an artist. Matter of fact, he had somewhat of a normal childhood to a certain point. He was
Yeah.
yeah, he sang in the choir. He was thinking about becoming a priest. But what changed him is when his brother died of measles. That changed his whole perspective. He went from being an outgoing child to being someone that was like um detached. He
Yeah.
was detached from everybody.
He would spend days in the cemetery.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, a lot of ways this could have went if everything had went right in his direction, and he probably wouldn't have become the monster that he became.
Yeah.
All right. So now, how did he go from being? How do you think he went from being? All right, he's born in Austria. Austria and Germany are right next door. So how come he had this? Um, how come he had this? What's called affinity for being German? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, during his time, even once he became 18, he went to Vienna to apply to art school. But because he got rejected to art school, my guess is he became on the streets and homeless, and he probably blamed a lot of that hatred on the Jews and anti-Semitism at the time in reference to his German nationality. But with it, and his father was a pro-Austrian, so yeah,
Yes, that's true. Yeah, a lot of the Austrians back then, there's a lot of them that spoke German,
yep,
and they had they had a closeness with the idea of um, being with Germany,
hmm
and so that's what he that's what he sort of gravitated to. Now, the one thing that is surprising with Hitler as we go further, but we're not going to get there yet. But as we get further, that he actually, if you saw him in the street, let's say before he rose to power, he would give the appearance of somebody that was homeless because he was homeless,
yeah,
and he'd be like, could you imagine coming out of Penn Station, seeing
yeah,
somebody homeless, and the next year they're the president of your country? Yeah,
yeah,
that's it. That's insane.
yeah,
But
yeah,
we're going to talk about later on how he got there. All right, so he was not a obviously he was after his brother died. He was not a good student. He like I said, he was a bully when he was coming up, and his sister used to say that he used to slap her when he was a teenager. You know, so but the main thing we talked about is what what did he really want to become? So we do know that he wanted to become a an artist. So
yeah.
now he grows up, he drops out of school, he decides to leave Austria and head to Germany. So now so he applies to a couple of art schools, and obviously he was rejected.
Yeah, fortunately.
Yeah, they said that he was good in terms of drawing buildings. He was outstanding with that, but he couldn't
Yeah.
draw. But he was not good at drawing people.
Figures. Yeah.
Yeah, and having his pictures come to life, and so he basically bounced around. He went from did odd jobs. He lived in a shelter, and he tried to sell some of his artwork as posters.
Yeah. Postcards.
Yes, postcards, right? But then an amazing thing happened in
World War One.
19 yep, 1914,
And
World
art
War
student
One.
Ferdinand was assassinated by a Bavarian prince in the city of Sarajevo, and because
Yes.
the intertwined alliances of Europe at the time eventually to everyone being at war with everyone.
Well, see, that's a good subject that you just brought up because um, alliances. There was the system of alliances.
Balance of power. And,
Yes, balance of power is another thing. Um, New World Order, and it was basically World War One was basically the battle of the planet.
yeah, the war
Battle of the
to
planet.
end all wars, the Great War.
Yes, which no one talks about. Yeah, that was supposed to be the war to end all wars, and then 20 years later we get to that too later on. But yes, so he's in the crowd when World War One was declared, and he actually he actually could have fought for Austria. He left there to fight for Germany, so he
Yep.
was actually a deserter for Austria.
Yeah,
That's, that's but that changed his whole life. And he was in battle. He was in a lot of battles. But during World War I, he took the job as a courier. So going from trench to trench, delivering messages, which was very dangerous at the time.
Brave soul.
Oh, most definitely. But he just loved the idea of the whole concept of battle, men shooting at each other and dying in battle,
Yeah.
which stuck with him pretty much for the rest of his life. So now after World War I, or what? Before we even get to that point, he got hurt in the battle.
Yep.
He got by poison gas,
Fluorine gas. Yes.
and he
Yeah.
he lost his sight.
Yeah.
But when the doctors checked him, they found out that his sight wasn't caused. He didn't lose his sight because of the poison gas. It was psychological. So he had to actually be hypnotized to get his sight back.
Wow. PTSD.
Yeah, how about that?
Wow.
All right, so so the war is over, but here's the thing with World War I, and the reason why we got into World War II. All right, we know Germany lost, and they clearly lost.
Yeah.
But then now there was some misinformation that came out, and which is the problem that some societies have with misinformation. We're not gonna
I'm familiar.
Yeah, the misinformation was that the reason why the reason why Germany lost was not because of what they did in battle. It was because of the politicians that just caved in. But the real reason that Germany lost because they just couldn't maintain the what it takes to to furnish a war. Because now you're going against France, you're going against Germany, the United States gets into it. So the United States, so it was just they just didn't have the resources to fight.
And the people were starving. They have been blockaded for grain for 4 years by then.
Right. So they militarily lost the war. You know, they militarily lost the war. Just like in this country, when it was the North against the South in the Civil War, the South lost the war. They lost. They didn't have the resources to win the war.
Yeah.
But we won't get that's as far as we'll go with that.
Win the battle, lose the war. Yeah.
Right. So with that being said, so a dangerous idea, misinformation was coming out that the reason why Germany lost was because of the politicians. And that, right. And once you start with disinformation and people start, you say it enough times, you say the lie enough times, and people start believing it.
It becomes true.
Right. So that was part one. All right. So we can fast forward to about maybe 5 years later, after World
Mm-hmm.
War, after World War I. Germany was going through a lot of turmoil with the economy. The economy was not doing well. You know, it was still a democratic society, but they weren't getting too much done. So
Yeah.
now Hitler was he was he was assigned to spy on this in this small political party that later on become the Nazi party.
National.
But as he was spying on them, he actually liked some of the things that they were saying, and he later joined the party.
Yep.
And then they recognized that he was an outstanding speaker. So now they get to this idea in 1923 that they want to start a revolution. All right. So, and they called this revolution the Beer Hall Putsch.
In Munich, I believe.
Right. right,
Yeah.
in Munich, right. So he goes to, and that's crazy. He goes to, well, him and his followers go to. Matter of fact, the one thing about the beer hall I forgot to mention: the beer hall is usually where the politicians, the leaders met to discuss, politics. It was
Yeah.
is a relaxed atmosphere where it would be similar to, let's say, going to Washington D.C., where everybody is gathered around, where all the big people are gathered around. So him and the Nazi followers figure, are we gonna go there and we gonna try to take over the country right then and there? Did it work for him? How'd that work for him?
He got jail.
Oh yeah. Well, many of his members got killed
Yeah.
in that, and yes, he got sentenced to 5 years in prison, but he didn't serve all 5 years. He served
Yeah.
one, he served 1 year,
Yeah.
and he also, some of his followers were in prison with him. One being, um one of his main men was called, named Rudolf Hess.
Yep.
Rudolf
And he
Hess.
also took the time to write my Kampf. Yeah.
Yes. All right. And he was, and during his time in prison, he wrote a book that you can just now get.
I read it before.
You read that?
Um, I've read it. It was very boring. It was basically a huge long rant of why the Jews are the scapegoat. Yeah.
Yes. Well, see, that's another interesting point that you just brought up, because because authoritarian leaders or people who want to do that, they need a scapegoat. They need somebody to blame. All right, and of course their followers are gonna what you call it, follow follow that. It's been done for centuries. There's always somebody at fault. Why can't I make it? I can't make it because so and so is stopping me from making it, or I can't get a job because the jobs are going to other types of people, or I can't, or so and so owns the music industry, so and so owns the financial, but those are just excuses, and you need those, and
Yeah.
when times are bad, people fall into that.
It's very easy.
All right, so Mein Kampf, for those people who don't know, you know, translate to my struggle. So yes, um, the reviews on that book, as you just said, was boring. You're right. It was just a ranting at what's wrong with the country and who's stopping us from succeeding.
But
But
the people at that time loved him because they gave him hope and an easy scapegoat.
right, and but the one thing, and there's nothing in his early history. There's no incident that he had, or they have a reason to hate the Jews. There's nothing there, and so,
Exactly.
but he had to pick something, obviously.
Yeah.
All right, so he writes the book, but here's the key with all that, and not all dictators do it. Some do, some don't. He told you everything he planned on doing.
Yeah.
He, he told you what he was going to do to the Jews. He told you how he was going to start a world war to get the power and what they call the living space that he wanted for his people. He said all that. The thing that tells you is that, hey, we need to start listening to people who tell you what they're going to do. He burned,
Yeah.
I give you another insight too. He burned books. Books, knowledge is power. Now, one of the books he burnt was from a man that lived over 500 years ago. It's a man named Nostradamus. Nostradamus
Mm.
said that there would be three people that would try to take over the world. All right. The first one was Napoleon. And Napoleon came about this close to getting the whole planet. The second one he said was Hitler. Hitler came this close. And that's one of the books that he burnt. He burnt that
Wow.
book because Napoleon also said that the second person was not going to be successful. And that's how, and he didn't want people to know that. So you burn books because you don't want, because the dumber you make people, or you let them not have not have the knowledge, the easiest for you to control them. Just like
Knowledge is power.
just like you said, he who controls the food control the people. He who controls the knowledge control the people too. Yep. So he gets out of prison, and then now he goes back to the party, and he finds that the party is in disarray.
Yeah.
Yep. So he now has to and that's the key part we're going to save for the next time. But for the next time that we talk, we need to find out. Well, not to find out. We already know. But we're going to tell people, how did this man who had nothing rise to power, and rise? How did he do it? How did he do it legally? He tried to do it illegally. You can't start. You can't start a revolution through violence. I mean, you could start one, but you're not going to be always successful.
Yeah.
How did this man do it? How did he get from nothing to something? One way you get to something is that if people believe in you, and you have, gift of speech, which he definitely had. He could definitely control a crowd. You need backing of people that have money. It's the billionaires that support you, that can
Mm.
support you to get to where you need to go, which is,
Mm.
and that's pretty much in every society. So we're gonna definitely talk about the people who um who gave him the money to get this done. Oh yeah, one more thing I forgot about World War One, which was very important, and the that's where the people who are rich don't care how they get money. It's one
Yeah.
thing that they didn't bring out. It didn't appear that much in school when I was they didn't talk about that much. But anytime there's a war, you get people that want to fund both sides.
War profiteering.
Yes, there were people in the United States who gave money to the Axis powers, and they gave money to the Allies.
Yep.
They also did that in World War II. We'll get into that even that much later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yes, there's money to be made in war. That's definitely. All right, so he becomes he rebuilds the Nazi Party, but now something else major happened in the United States that also affected Germany as well. We already know. October 24th, 1929. Stock market crash. Stock market crash. And that basically killed the economy of a lot of countries, but definitely Germany. People were starving. You could have their money system was dead. You could have a barrel full of their dollars, the German marks, and it was worth nothing. The political leaders at the time didn't know how to solve any problems. So now here comes Adolf Hitler. And now he's telling you what the politicians are not doing, and how if you put him in power, he can change things. That sounds familiar too.
Yeah. Really familiar.
Yes. Well, it's like this. What do we always say about history?
repeats or rhymes.
Yep. It always repeats itself. It always does. And until you learn the lessons from history, it's going to repeat again. It's definitely going to repeat again. But yes. So now we don't have to get he tried to get into power illegally. He gets in legally this time.
Yeah.
All right, he gets in legally when the prime minister, Hindenburg, makes Hitler the president, and he makes Hitler the president because he feels that he can control him.
Like a puppet.
Did he control him?
No. The
Of
puppet
course not.
died. Hindenburg died.
Right. I mean, we're going through this kind of quick, but the idea is that he had people under him to help him as well. So if you're going to put out disinformation, you need someone to do it. So the main person that he used to organize the party and put out disinformation was Joseph Goebbels.
Yeah.
All right, so Goebbels gets just as much blame for putting out disinformation as Hitler does with the murders.
Yeah.
All right, so we have to get our next segment. We have to get into who was behind Hitler, that was supporting him, his inner circle. We're gonna definitely talk about the millionaires who would be considered billionaires at that time period, who helped fund him. And now believe it or not, even around this time, there was a Nazi party in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah.
Matter of fact, they were in New York. they had like a camp in New York. So I mean, this is just a very, very interesting time period in which we thought that it would never we never see this again. I mean, I used to be your age, and we talked about this stuff in class. But the party, the Nazi party, was like, no, we took it as a joke in that time period. But now the joke now.
Yeah. Not a joke now.
All right. So we got 2 minutes left. Did you want to add anything?
You were very thorough. I mean, Hitler he was an incest baby technically because his father, it was like his third wife or something, and he married his cousin.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, that's true. But the father definitely had an influence on him.
Definitely.
Had his father treated him
Human.
more kindly, we probably wouldn't have to go through this time period. But
Yeah.
that'll be something maybe for part 2 will be very good. And the fact that once we'll have that'll be like the middle part of how he gets in power. We might have to do a part 3.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe if we talk about how he could have stayed in power.
Yeah.
You know, had he not been had he if he had a clear plan of when to stop. But you know what though? But people like that almost never do anyway.
Nope. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, co-host.
Thank you. Thank you, Marvin. Until next time. Hopefully we can do it next week, honestly. It's so
Right.
live.
And also, if I cancel, stop using Bernie Sanders as me.
Oh no, that's not you. That's me.
Huh?
Yeah,
That was who?
that's me. The Bernie Sanders image is just funny.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, it is. But in my household, I keep getting called Bernie Sanders.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
but no, that's all right. No, you can use him.
The
That's
listening, the listening. That's funny.
all right.
The phones. That's crazy though.
All right. All right. So this concludes part one of Adolf Hitler. Thank you,
Oh,
everybody that was listening, and we have a whole lot more to get into next time.
right. Until next time.
All right.
Good night, everyone. Have a good night.
All right. Good night. Good night.